Joe Miller wiped sweat from his forehead as he looked at the old clock on the wall of Peterson's Auto Repair. The time was 7:30 p.m., and the shop had closed 30 minutes ago. Everyone else had gone home already. Joe was still there, working on cars that needed to be fixed by tomorrow morning. His hands were dirty with oil and grease, and his blue work shirt had dark stains all over it. He had been working since 7 in the morning with only a short break for lunch. Joe's stomach made a loud noise. He was very hungry. He had eaten only a small sandwich for lunch, and that was many hours ago. He thought about the $20 in his wallet. That was all the money he had until payday, which was still 3 days away. He needed that money for bus fare and maybe some cheap food to last until then. At 32 years old, Joe was known as the hardest working mechanic at Peterson's. He never complained, always showed up on time and stayed late when needed. Despite his hard work, Joe always struggled with money. His small apartment cost too much, and he was behind on rent again. His landlord, Mr. Garcia, had warned him twice, this month already. "Just 2 more cars to fix," Joe said to himself as he picked up a wrench. "Then I can go home." The shop was quiet now. The loud sounds of tools, the radio, and other mechanics talking had all stopped. Joe could hear the rain starting to hit the metal roof of the building. He didn't have an umbrella, and his apartment was a 20-minute walk from the bus stop. It was going to be a wet walk home tonight. Joe slid under an old blue Chevy with a leaking transmission. The problem wasn't too hard to fix, but it was messy work. As he was reaching for a tool, he heard the bell on the front door of the shop ring. Someone had come in. "We're closed," Joe called out, but he still rolled out from under the car to see who it was. A woman stood in the doorway. She looked about 45 years old and wore nice clothes that were now wet from the rain. Her hair was a light brown with some gray, and she carried an expensive-looking purse. But what Joe noticed most was the worried look on her face. "I'm sorry to bother you after closing time," the woman said, "but my car broke down 2 blocks from here. I saw your lights were still on and hoped someone could help me." Joe stood up and wiped his hands on an old rag. He was about to tell her that she would have to come back tomorrow when she spoke again. "I have a very important meeting early tomorrow morning. It's about a job I really need. If my car isn't fixed tonight, I won't make it to the meeting." Her voice shook a little as she explained. Something about the woman reminded Joe of his own mother. His mom had raised him alone after his dad left them when Joe was only 6 years old. She had often looked just as worried when money was tight and problems came up. Joe's mom had taught him that helping others was always the right thing to do, even when it was hard. "Where is your car?" Joe asked with a small sigh. The woman's face lit up with hope. "It's just down the street near the corner by the drugstore. It just stopped running while I was driving." All the lights on the dashboard came on at once. Joe thought for a moment. His boss, Mr. Peterson, would be angry if he found out Joe was helping a customer after hours without charging extra fees. But Mr. Peterson hardly ever came to the shop anymore, leaving Joe and the other mechanics to handle everything. "My name's Joe," he said, reaching for his tool bag. "I'm Linda Brown," the woman said with a grateful smile. "Thank you so much for helping me." The rain was coming down harder now as Joe followed Linda to her car. It was a nice black sedan that looked only a few years old. Joe was surprised to see such an expensive car with problems. These models were usually reliable. Joe opened the hood and checked a few things. After about 10 minutes, he knew what the problem was. "It's your alternator," he told Linda, who was standing under her umbrella trying to keep both of them dry. "It's completely failed. That's why all your warning lights came on. Your battery wasn't being charged while you were driving." "Can it be fixed tonight?" Linda asked hopefully. Joe thought about the part needed. "We have alternators for this model in stock at the shop, but it's not a quick fix. It would take me at least 2 hours, maybe more." Linda's face fell. "I understand if you can't do it. You probably want to get home to your family." Joe thought about his empty apartment. There was no family waiting for him, just a small TV and some leftover pasta in the fridge that was probably bad by now. "I don't have anyone waiting at home," Joe admitted. "But I should warn you, this repair isn't cheap. The part alone costs over $300 plus labor. Linda nodded. Money isn't the problem. Making it to my meeting tomorrow is what matters. Joe's stomach growled again, loud enough for Linda to hear it this time. Have you had dinner? She asked. Joe felt his face turn red with embarrassment. Not yet. I was going to grab something on the way home. Let me call a tow truck for my car, Linda said. Then, while you work on it, I'll get us both some dinner. It's the least I can do since you're staying late to help me. 30 minutes later, Linda's car was back at the shop. Joe had started, taking out the bad alternator while Linda sat in the small waiting area. The shop didn't have much, just a few old chairs, outdated magazines, and a coffee machine that made terrible coffee. Joe tried to focus on his work, but his hands were shaking slightly from hunger. He hadn't eaten much in the past 2 days, trying to stretch his money until payday. The smell of food hit him before he saw Linda return with 2 large bags. I wasn't sure what you like, so I got burgers, fries, and milkshakes from the diner down the street, Linda said, setting the food on the small table in the waiting area. Joe wanted to keep working, but the smell was too good to resist. Thank you. You didn't have to do that. Please, eat while it's hot, Linda insisted. The car can wait 15 minutes. Joe washed his hands and sat down across from Linda. He tried to eat slowly and be polite, but he was so hungry that he finished his burger in just a few bites. Linda smiled as she watched him eat. You were hungry. Would you like my fries too? I can't finish them. Joe shook his head. No, thank you. This is more than enough. As they ate, Linda asked Joe about himself. Joe didn't usually talk much about his life, but there was something easy about talking to Linda. I've been working here for 8 years, Joe told her. I always liked fixing things, even as a kid. My mom said I took apart our toaster when I was 5 and actually put it back together so it worked. Your mother must be very proud of you, Linda said. Joe looked down at his food. She passed away 5 years ago. Cancer. She didn't have good insurance and the bills. He stopped himself. Sorry. You don't need to hear about my problems. I'm sorry about your mother, Linda said gently. It sounds like she raised a good man. Joe felt uncomfortable with the compliment and changed the subject. What about your meeting tomorrow? You said it's important. Linda nodded. Very important. It could change a lot of things for me, and for others too. After they finished eating, Joe went back to work on the car with new energy. As he worked, Linda asked questions about the shop, how many people worked there, how business was going, how Mr. Peterson ran things. Joe answered honestly, Mr. Peterson doesn't come in much anymore. He's got other businesses that make more money. This place could be great with the right management. We get plenty of customers, but many don't come back because the prices are too high, and some of the mechanics rush through jobs. By 11:30 p.m., Joe had replaced the alternator and fixed a few other small problems he had noticed. When he finished, he only charged Linda for the parts, not for his time. I can't let you work 4 extra hours for free, Linda protested when she saw the bill. Consider it my good deed for the day, Joe said with a tired smile. As Linda paid the bill, she looked around the shop one more time with an interested expression that Joe didn't quite understand. Then she thanked him again and drove away in her now working car. Joe locked up the shop and started his walk to the bus stop in the rain, too tired to even care about getting wet. He had no idea that helping Linda Brown would completely change his life by this time tomorrow. Joe woke up the next morning feeling tired. He had gotten home after midnight and had trouble falling asleep. His wet clothes had left a puddle on his apartment floor, and his old alarm clock had rung too early as usual. As he got ready for work, he made himself a cup of instant coffee. There was no food in his small refrigerator. He would have to wait until lunch to eat. The bus was late that morning, and Joe worried about getting to work on time. Mr. Peterson rarely came to the shop, but when he did, he always complained if anyone was even 1 minute late. Joe had never been late in 8 years, and he didn't want to start now. When the bus finally arrived at his stop, Joe ran the 3 blocks to Peterson's Auto Repair. He pushed open the door at exactly 7:00 a.m., out of breath but on time. What he saw inside made him stop in surprise. All 5 of the other mechanics were standing in a group near the front desk. They were usually at their stations by now, getting ready for the day's work. Even more surprising was that Mr. Peterson himself was there. The short, heavy man with thinning gray hair stood with his arms crossed, looking nervous. He almost never came to the shop this early. "Joe, good, you're here," Mr. Peterson said, his voice sounding strange. "We've been waiting for you." Joe felt worried. Had he done something wrong? Was Mr. Peterson angry about him helping Linda after hours? "Am I in trouble?" Joe asked, looking at the other mechanics for some clue about what was happening. Mr. Peterson shook his head. "No, but there's someone here who wants to talk to all of us. She's in my office." Just then, the office door opened, and a woman walked out. Joe's mouth fell open in shock. It was Linda Brown from last night, but she looked completely different. Instead of wet, messy clothes, she wore a neat business suit. Her hair was styled perfectly, and she carried a leather folder. She looked like an important business person. "Good morning, everyone," Linda said with a smile. When she saw Joe, her smile grew bigger. "Hello, Joe. Nice to see you again." The other mechanics looked at Joe with curious expressions. One of them, Bill, whispered, "You know her?" Before Joe could answer, Mr. Peterson cleared his throat loudly. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Linda Harrison," he said, sounding nervous. She is the majority owner of Peterson's Auto Group." Joe felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. Linda wasn't just any customer. She owned the company, his company. Well, not his exactly, but the place he had worked for 8 years. The other mechanics looked just as shocked. Everyone had thought Mr. Peterson was the only owner. "Most of you don't know this," Linda explained, "but my father was Mr. Peterson's business partner when they started this company 30 years ago. When my father died 10 years ago, I inherited his share of the business. I've been a silent partner until now, letting Mr. Peterson run the day-to-day operations." She walked around the front desk area, looking at the shop with careful eyes. "Recently, I've been concerned about how our shops are doing. Customer complaints have gone up and profits have gone down. So I decided to see for myself what was happening." Mr. Peterson's face was red now. He looked at the floor instead of at Linda or the mechanics. "Last night," Linda continued, "my car really did break down near this shop, but I had been planning to visit anyway. What I experienced as a customer told me a lot about how this business is being run." She turned to look directly at Joe. "And it showed me who really cares about this shop and its customers." Joe felt his face getting hot as everyone turned to look at him. "Joe, could I speak with you in the office, please?" Linda asked. Joe followed Linda into Mr. Peterson's office, feeling very confused. The office was small but had much nicer furniture than the rest of the shop. There was a big desk, a leather chair, and pictures of cars on the walls. Mr. Peterson came in behind them and closed the door. "Please, sit down," Linda said to Joe, pointing to a chair across from the desk. Joe sat down, still not understanding what was happening. His work clothes felt dirty and out of place in this clean office. "Joe, I want to thank you again for your help last night," Linda said. "Not many people would stay 4 hours after closing time to help a stranger." "It was nothing," Joe said, feeling uncomfortable with the praise. "Anyone would have done it." Linda shook her head. "No, they wouldn't. And that's exactly my point. You didn't know who I was. You had no idea I owned part of this company. You helped me because it was the right thing to do." Mr. Peterson shifted in his seat, looking unhappy. "While you were fixing my car," Linda continued, "you told me some things about this shop, about how it's being run, about prices being too high, and about Mr. Peterson not being here much. Was that all true?" Joe looked at Mr. Peterson, who was staring at him with an angry expression. Joe didn't want to get in trouble, but he also didn't want to lie. "Yes, it was true," Joe said quietly. "I didn't mean any disrespect, but that's how things are." Linda nodded. "I thought so. After I left last night, I looked at the company records. I found some interesting things. This shop makes less money than our other locations, even though it's in a busier area. Customer complaints are highest here, and employee turnover is a problem too." Mr. Peterson started to speak, but Linda held up her hand to stop him. "I've made a decision," she said. I'm going to be taking a more active role in this company from now on, starting with this location. She turned to Mr. Peterson. Sam, you and I will discuss your role later. For now, I'd like some time alone with Joe. Mr. Peterson looked like he wanted to argue, but instead he stood up and left the office, closing the door harder than necessary. Once they were alone, Linda's expression softened. Joe, tell me honestly, if this were your shop, what would you do differently? Joe was surprised by the question. No one had ever asked for his opinion before. Well, he said slowly, thinking about it, I would lower the prices a bit. We charge too much for simple repairs, and that drives customers away. I would make sure we do quality work on every car, not just the expensive ones, and I would treat the mechanics better so they take pride in their work. Linda listened carefully, nodding as Joe spoke. When he finished, she smiled. Those are exactly the changes I want to make, she said. And I need someone to help me make them. Someone who knows cars, knows this shop, and most importantly, knows how to treat people right. Joe wasn't sure what she was saying. Joe, I'm offering you a job, Linda explained. I want you to be the new manager of this shop. Joe couldn't believe what he was hearing. Him? A manager? But I'm just a mechanic, he said. I don't know anything about running a business. You know more than you think, Linda replied, and I'll help you learn the rest. What you can't learn is character, and you've shown me you have that. She opened her leather folder and took out some papers. The salary would be $75,000 a year to start, she said. Joe nearly fell out of his chair. That was more than 3 times what he made now. That's too much, he said without thinking. Linda laughed. No, it's what a good manager is worth, plus health insurance and 2 weeks paid vacation to start. Joe's mind was spinning. With that kind of money, he could pay his rent on time, he could buy a car instead of taking the bus. He could even save money for the future. What about Mr. Peterson? Joe asked. Sam will be working at our corporate office from now on, Linda said. He won't be your problem. Joe took a deep breath. This was happening so fast. Yesterday, he was just a mechanic struggling to pay rent. Today, he was being offered a manager job with more money than he had ever dreamed of making. Can I think about it? Joe asked. Of course, Linda said with a smile, but I hope you'll say yes. I think we could make a good team. As Joe left the office, his mind was full of possibilities. The other mechanics looked at him with curious faces, wondering what had happened in that office. Joe wasn't ready to tell them yet. He needed time to think. But as he picked up his tools and got to work on the first car of the day, he couldn't help smiling. For the first time in years, Joe felt hopeful about his future. Joe worked through the morning in a daze. His hands moved automatically, fixing cars as they always did, but his mind was somewhere else. The conversation with Linda kept playing over and over in his head. Manager of the shop, $75,000 a year, health insurance, paid vacation. These things had always seemed impossible for someone like him. During lunch break, Joe sat alone on an old plastic chair behind the shop. He had brought a peanut butter sandwich from home, made with the last of his bread. As he ate, he tried to think clearly about Linda's offer. Could he really be a manager? He knew everything about fixing cars, but running a business was different. What if he failed? What if the other mechanics didn't respect him anymore? Bill and Steve had been working at the shop longer than he had. Would they be angry if Joe became their boss? Joe was so deep in thought that he didn't notice Linda approaching until she spoke. Mind if I join you? She asked. Joe quickly stood up, brushing crumbs from his work shirt. Of course not, Ms. Harrison. Linda smiled. Please call me Linda, may I? She pointed to another plastic chair nearby. Joe nodded and moved the chair closer for her. It seemed strange to see someone in such nice clothes sitting on an old dirty chair in the back of an auto shop. I wanted to check in with you, Linda said. I know I surprised you this morning. I'm sure you have questions. Joe hesitated. He did have many questions, but he wasn't sure where to start. Why me? He finally asked. There are other mechanics with more experience. Bill has been here for 12 years. Linda nodded. Experience is important, but it's not everything. Bill is a good mechanic, but last week he charged Mrs. Gonzalez double what the repair should have cost. And Steve has been late 20 times in the past 3 months. Joe was surprised that Linda knew these details. I've been reviewing the records, she explained, seeing his expression. And I've been calling some of our customers. Your name keeps coming up as someone who is honest, hardworking, and truly cares about doing a good job. She looked around at the shop. This place has potential, Joe. But it needs the right person in charge. Someone the customers trust and the employees respect. Joe thought about this. He did have good relationships with the regular customers. Many of them asked for him specifically when they brought their cars in. And the other mechanics did come to him when they had difficult problems to solve. I don't know much about the business side, Joe admitted. The paperwork, ordering parts, managing money. That can be learned, Linda said. I'll help you. We have systems in place that make those things easier than you might think. And I'll be available whenever you have questions. Joe took a deep breath. Can I ask why Mr. Peterson isn't going to be running the shop anymore? Linda's expression became more serious. That's a fair question. The truth is, Sam hasn't been managing this shop well for a long time. Prices are too high, quality is inconsistent, and employees aren't treated fairly. I've tried talking to him about these issues, but he hasn't made the changes needed. She leaned forward slightly. I don't want to lose this business, Joe. My father helped build it from nothing, but if things don't improve, we'll have to close this location. Joe felt a knot in his stomach at the thought of the shop closing. Despite its problems, he loved working there, and he needed the job. I don't want that to happen either, he said, quietly. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Linda spoke again. You don't have to decide right now. Take the rest of the day to think about it. Talk to your family if you want to. Joe looked down at his hands. They were stained with grease and had small cuts and calluses from years of working with tools. I don't have any family, he said. It's just me. Linda's eyes softened. Then talk to friends or just take some time to think. This is a big decision. Joe nodded and Linda stood up to leave. Before she walked away, she turned back to him. One more thing, Joe. Whether you take the job or not, I want to thank you again for helping me last night. Not many people would have done that. After she left, Joe went back to work. The afternoon passed quickly as the shop was busy with customers. Joe noticed that Linda stayed in the office, going through files and talking on the phone. Mr. Peterson didn't return. At 5 o'clock, the usual closing time, Joe was finishing up with his last car of the day. The other mechanics had already cleaned up their areas and were getting ready to leave. Hey, Joe, Bill called out. We're going for beers at Rusty's. Want to come? The other mechanics rarely invited Joe to join them after work. He usually stayed, late anyway, so he had never become part of their social group. Thanks, Joe said, surprised by the invitation. But I need to finish this oil change first. Suit yourself, Bill replied with a shrug. See you tomorrow. As the others left, Joe completed the oil change and began cleaning his tools. The shop was quiet again, just like the night before when Linda had first come in. It seemed like a lifetime ago now. Joe was putting away the last of his tools when he heard footsteps. Linda was walking toward him from the office. Everyone's gone home? She asked. Yes, Joe said. I was just finishing up. Linda looked around at the now clean work area. You're always the last to leave, aren't you? Joe nodded. I like to make sure everything is done right. That's one of the reasons you'd make a good manager, Linda said. She paused, then asked, Have you thought about my offer? Joe had been thinking about nothing else all day. He had gone back and forth in his mind, listing the reasons to say yes and the reasons to say no. But standing here now, looking at Linda's hopeful expression, he suddenly knew his answer. Yes, he said. I'd like to try being the manager. Linda's face lit up with a smile. I'm so glad. I think you're making the right choice, Joe. I'm nervous about it, Joe admitted, but I want to help make this place better. That's exactly why you're the right person for the job, Linda said. Now how about we celebrate? Dinner is on me. This time, instead of fast food eaten in the shop's waiting area, Linda took Joe to a nice restaurant downtown. Joe felt out of place in his work clothes, but the staff treated him with respect. Over dinner, Linda explained more about what Joe's new job would involve. He would be responsible for managing the mechanics, dealing with customers, ordering parts, and making sure repairs were done correctly and on time. The most important thing, Linda said, is to bring back trust. We need customers to know they can trust us not to overcharge them or do unnecessary work. And we need employees to trust that they'll be treated fairly. Joe nodded. These were things he had always believed in. When do I start? He asked. How about Monday? Linda suggested. That gives us tomorrow and the weekend to get you ready. I'll need to introduce you to our computer system and show you the paperwork side of things. As they finished their meal, Linda handed Joe an envelope. This is an advance on your first paycheck. I thought you might need it. Joe opened the envelope and saw a check for $2,000, more money than he had seen at one time in years. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, Linda replied. Just be the same honest, hard-working person you've always been. That's all I ask. As Joe rode the bus home that night, he felt like he was in a dream. 24 hours. Go. He had been a struggling mechanic who could barely pay his rent. Now he was about to become the manager of Peterson's auto repair with a salary that would change his life. He thought about what his mother would say if she could see him now. She had always told him that good things happen to good people, eventually. Maybe she was right after all. When Joe reached his small apartment, he didn't feel the same heaviness he usually felt when he opened the door. Instead, for the first time in years, he felt hope. Tomorrow would be the first day of his new life. The next morning, Joe woke up before his alarm clock rang. For the first time in years, he felt excited to go to work. He showered and put on his cleanest work shirt. With some of the advance money Linda had given him, he stopped at a coffee shop and bought a real breakfast: eggs, bacon, and toast. It tasted better than anything he could remember eating in a long time. When Joe arrived at the shop, Linda was already there. She wore jeans and a simple blouse today instead of her business suit. She had told him they would spend the day going over the business side of running the shop, and she wanted to be comfortable. Good morning, Joe, Linda said with a smile. Ready for your crash course in management? Joe nodded, feeling both excited and nervous. As ready as I'll ever be. They started in the office where Linda showed Joe the computer system used for tracking repairs, ordering parts, and billing customers. Joe had never used a computer much before, but Linda was patient as she explained how everything worked. Don't worry about learning it all at once, she said when she saw Joe's worried face. You'll get better with practice. Next, they went through the financial records. Joe was shocked to see how much money the shop made each month. He was even more shocked to see how much of that money was being wasted on unnecessary expenses. Mr. Peterson was ordering parts we don't need, Joe said, looking at the inventory list. We have 10 air filters for a car model that nobody drives anymore. Linda nodded. That's the kind of thing I need you to fix. You know what parts we actually use so you can order smarter. By lunchtime, Joe's head was spinning with all the new information. Linda suggested they take a break and get some fresh air. They walked to a small park across the street and sat on a bench eating sandwiches that Linda had brought. How are you feeling about all this? Linda asked. Joe took a deep breath. It's a lot to learn, but I think I can do it. I know you can, Linda said. That's why I chose you. After lunch, they returned to the shop to meet with the other mechanics. Linda had called them in for a special Saturday meeting. All 5 mechanics stood in the front area of the shop, looking confused and a little worried. Thank you all for coming in today, Linda said. I have an important announcement to make. Starting Monday, Joe will be the new manager of Peterson's Auto Repair. The mechanics looked at Joe with surprised expressions. Bill, the oldest mechanic, frowned slightly. With all due respect, Ms. Harrison, Bill said. Joe's a good mechanic, but he's never been a manager before. Some of us have been here longer. Linda nodded. That's a fair point, Bill. Experience matters. but so does character and work ethic. Joe has shown both. He'll need all of your help to make this shop the best it can be. She looked at each mechanic in turn. There will be some changes. We're going to lower our prices on basic services to be more competitive. We're going to focus on quality work that makes customers want to come back. And we're going to create a better work environment for all of you. The mechanics glanced at each other. Some looked skeptical, others curious. If any of you don't want to be part of these changes, I understand, Linda continued. But I hope you'll give Joe and the new direction a chance. After the meeting, most of the mechanics came up to congratulate Joe. Only Bill held back, still looking unhappy about the decision. Bill, Joe said, approaching the older mechanic. I know this is a surprise. I didn't expect it either. Bill shrugged. It's fine, just don't expect me to call you boss. Joe smiled. I don't. I'm still just Joe. I'm still going to be working on cars too. I'll just have some extra responsibilities now. Bill seemed to relax a little. Well, good luck. You're gonna need it. That evening, after everyone else had left, Linda gave Joe a set of keys to the shop. These are yours now, she said. The shop is your responsibility. Joe held the keys tightly. They felt heavy in his hand, like they carried the weight of his new role. I won't let you down, he promised. Linda smiled. I know you won't. Now go home and get some rest. Monday will be here before you know it. The weekend passed quickly. Joe spent Sunday cleaning his apartment and buying a few new clothes with some of his advance money. He also visited his mother's grave, telling her about the amazing change in his life. Monday morning arrived and Joe got to the shop an hour early. He wanted to be there before anyone else. He unlocked the doors with his new keys and turned on the lights. The shop looked different somehow now that he was responsible for it. Joe walked around checking that everything was ready for the day. He made a fresh pot of coffee and put out some donuts he had bought for the mechanics. It was a small thing, but he wanted to start his first day as manager on a positive note. The mechanics arrived at their usual times. They seemed surprised to see the donuts and coffee waiting for them. What's this? Steve asked, picking up a chocolate donut. Just a little something to start the week, Joe said. Help yourselves. The day started busy and stayed that way. Joe spent time working on cars, but he also dealt with customers, filled out paperwork, and ordered parts. It was more work than he had ever done in a single day, but he enjoyed the challenge. Around noon, a woman came in with a Honda that was making a strange noise. Joe recognized her as Mrs. Patel, a regular customer who always seemed unhappy with the service at Peterson's. Hello, Mrs. Patel, Joe said with a smile. What can we help you with today? Mrs. Patel looked surprised at the warm welcome. My car is making a clicking noise when I turn left. Mr. Peterson always told me it would cost at least $500 to fix, so I've been putting it off. Joe took her keys. Let me take a look before we talk about price. It might not be as bad as you think. After a quick test drive and inspection, Joe found the problem. It was a simple issue with a CV joint that needed lubrication, not replacement. I can fix this right now, Joe told Mrs. Patel. It will take about 30 minutes and cost $75 for parts and labor. Mrs. Patel looked shocked. But Mr. Peterson always said, Mr. Peterson isn't here anymore, Joe said gently. Things are different now. We're going to be honest about what your car really needs. While Joe worked on Mrs. Patel's car, Bill watched him from nearby. You could have charged her more, Bill said quietly. She was expecting to pay $500. Joe shook his head. That's not how we're going to do things anymore. We charge fair prices for the work that actually needs to be done. That way, customers come back. Bill seemed to think about this. Peterson always said we needed to maximize every job. And how's that working out? Joe asked. We lose customers every month because they feel cheated. When Mrs. Patel's car was fixed, she was so happy with the service and price that she promised to tell all her friends about the shop. That's how we grow the business, Joe told Bill. One satisfied customer at a time. By the end of the day, Joe was exhausted but proud. They had completed all scheduled repairs, plus several walk-in customers. Even Bill seemed to be warming up to the new way of doing things. As Joe was closing up the shop, his phone rang. It was Linda. "How was your first day as manager?" she asked. Joe smiled, looking around at the now quiet shop. "It was good. Busy, but good. Any problems?" "Nothing I couldn't handle," Joe said. "We had a customer who was surprised when I charged her a fair price instead of the inflated one she was expecting." Linda laughed. "That's exactly the kind of surprise I like to hear about. Keep it up, Joe. I knew you were the right person for this job." After hanging up, Joe locked the doors and walked to the bus stop. As he waited for the bus, he realized something important had changed. For years, he had felt stuck in his life, just getting by day to day. Now he had a purpose, a direction, and for the first time in a very long time, he felt proud of himself. The bus came, and Joe got on, heading home to his small apartment. But he knew he wouldn't be living there much longer. With his new salary, he could afford a better place. His life was changing in ways he never could have imagined, all because he had stayed late one night to help a stranger with a broken-down car. 6 months had passed since Joe became the manager of Peterson's Auto Repair. In that short time, many things had changed. The shop now had a new name, Miller's Honest Auto, with a bright new sign out front. The waiting area had comfortable chairs, a coffee machine that made good coffee, and clean magazines for customers to read while they waited. Joe had moved out of his old apartment into a nice one-bedroom place closer to the shop. He had bought a used car. Nothing fancy but reliable, so he no longer had to take the bus. His refrigerator always had food in it now, and he had even started putting money into a savings account each month. But the biggest changes were at the shop itself. Business was booming. Word had spread quickly about the fair prices and honest work. Old customers who had stopped coming to Peterson's were returning, and they brought new customers with them. Joe still worked on cars himself, but he spent more time managing the shop and talking with customers. He had hired 2 new mechanics to help with the increased business. One was a young woman named Kate who had just finished her training. Some customers were surprised to see a female mechanic, but Kate quickly proved she was one of the best. Even Bill, who had been skeptical at first, now supported Joe's way of running things. The mechanics were happier because they were busier, made better money, and didn't have to lie to customers anymore. One sunny morning in June, Joe arrived at the shop to find a line of cars already waiting outside. It was going to be another busy day. He unlocked the doors and turned on the lights, feeling proud of what the shop had become. As the mechanics arrived and got to work, Joe checked the day's schedule on the computer. Linda had taught him well, and he now handled the business side of things with confidence. Around 10 o'clock, a red SUV pulled into the parking lot. A woman got out and looked around the shop with a curious expression. She was about Joe's age, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. Joe recognized her as Olivia Carter, the owner of the flower shop down the street. He had fixed her delivery van a few times, but they had never really talked beyond business. "Good morning," Joe said as Olivia walked in. "Is there something wrong with the van again?" Olivia smiled. "No, the van is running perfectly, thanks to you. I actually came to ask a favor." "What can I help you with?" Joe asked. "I have a big wedding order this weekend," Olivia explained. "Lots of flowers to deliver. My van is too small, and I was wondering if I could rent or borrow a truck. Someone told me you might have one." Joe thought for a moment. "We do have a delivery truck we use for picking up parts. It's not pretty, but it runs well." "When would you need it?" "Saturday morning until Sunday afternoon," Olivia said. "I'd pay, of course." "No need," Joe replied. "You can use it for free. Consider it a favor between neighbors." Olivia looked surprised. "That's very kind of you. Are you sure?" Joe nodded. "Absolutely. I'll even help you load the flowers if you need an extra hand." A slight blush appeared on Olivia's cheeks. "That would be wonderful, thank you." After she left, Bill walked over to Joe with a knowing smile. "She's single, you know." Joe felt his own face getting warm. "I was just being helpful." Bill laughed. "Sure you were. Just like you were just being helpful when you stayed late to fix Linda Harrison's car. Look how that turned out." The rest of the week passed quickly. Joe found himself thinking about Olivia more than he expected to. There was something about her smile that stayed with him. Saturday morning, Joe got up early and went to the shop to get the truck ready for Olivia. He washed it, checked the oil and tires, and made sure everything was working properly. He wanted it to be perfect. Olivia arrived at 8 o'clock looking stressed. "Thank you again for this. The wedding is for the mayor's daughter, and everything has to be perfect." "Don't worry," Joe said. "The truck is all ready to go, and I'm free all day if you need help." Olivia looked relieved. "Actually, if you're serious about helping, I could really use it. My assistant called in sick this morning." Joe locked up the shop and followed Olivia to her flower store. The small shop was filled with buckets of beautiful flowers and dozens of arrangements ready to be delivered. They spent the morning loading flowers into the truck and delivering them to the church and reception hall. Joe was surprised by how hard Olivia worked and how passionate she was about her flowers. She told him she had started her business 5 years ago with just a small loan and a lot of determination. "It wasn't easy at first," she said as they drove between deliveries. "There were many times I thought about giving up." "I know exactly how that feels," Joe replied, thinking of his own struggles before Linda had changed his life. By late afternoon, all the deliveries were done. Olivia's flower arrangements had transformed the wedding venues from ordinary rooms into magical spaces. "They look beautiful," Joe said, watching Olivia add final touches to a table centerpiece. She smiled at him. "Thank you. For everything. I couldn't have done this without your help." "Happy to help," Joe said. "That's what neighbors are for." On the drive back to her shop, Olivia asked Joe about how he had become the manager of Miller's Honest Auto. "It's quite a story," Joe said, and he told her about the night Linda's car had broken down, how he had stayed late to help her not knowing she owned the company, and how that one act of kindness had changed his whole life. "That's amazing," Olivia said when he finished, "like something from a movie. Sometimes I still can't believe it myself," Joe admitted. When they got back to the flower shop, Olivia insisted on making dinner for Joe as thanks for his help. They sat in the small office behind her shop, eating pasta and talking for hours. Joe couldn't remember the last time he had enjoyed someone's company so much. The next morning, after helping Olivia collect the flowers from the wedding, Joe returned to his apartment feeling happier than he had in a long time. When his phone rang and he saw it was Linda calling, he was still smiling. "Joe, I have some exciting news," Linda said. "Can you meet me at the shop in an hour?" "Of course," Joe replied, curious about what Linda wanted to discuss. When Joe arrived at the shop, Linda was waiting in the office. She looked excited. "Joe, I've been watching how well you've turned this place around," Linda said. "Profits are up 50%. Customer complaints are down to almost zero. The mechanics are happier. You've done exactly what I hoped you would do." "Thank you," Joe said, feeling proud. "I've tried my best." "Well, your best is pretty impressive," Linda said with a smile. "That's why I want to offer you a new opportunity." She handed Joe a folder. Inside were plans for 3 new auto repair shops in nearby towns. "I want to expand," Linda explained. "Open these new locations, and I want you to oversee all of them as regional manager." Joe looked at the plans in shock. "Me? Regional manager?" Linda nodded. "You've proven you can turn a struggling shop into a successful one. I need someone who understands my vision for honest, quality service. Someone the customers and employees trust. That's you, Joe." The salary listed in the folder was nearly double what Joe was making now. It was more money than he had ever imagined earning. I don't know what to say," Joe stammered. "Say yes," Linda urged. "You deserve this, Joe, and I need you." Joe thought about how much his life had changed in just 6 months, from a struggling mechanic to the manager of a successful auto shop, and now this offer to oversee multiple locations, all because he had chosen to help someone in need, even when he had little to give himself. "I'd be honored," Joe said finally. "Thank you for believing in me." Linda smiled. "I've believed in you since that rainy night when you stayed late to help a stranger. You showed me your character then, and you've proven me right every day since." As Joe left the shop that afternoon, he called Olivia and asked if she would like to have dinner with him that evening. He had good news to share, and she was the person he most wanted to tell. Walking to his car, Joe thought about how helping Linda that night had been a turning point in his life. One simple act of kindness had opened doors he never knew existed. He had always believed what his mother taught him, that helping others was the right thing to do even when it was difficult. Now he knew that kindness could not only change other people's lives, it could change your own life too. That night, as Joe shared his good news with Olivia over dinner, he silently thanked the broken-down car that had brought Linda into his life. On that rainy night 6 months ago, sometimes the biggest blessings come disguised as inconveniences, arriving exactly when you need them most.